So when we actually sold Elvis to who turned the lights on in here? People are running around here doing things to me. Let's see. Let's pick up again. I'm sorry, here, Stephen. Wait just a minute. Hold on a minute. Let me see what happens here. There we go. It's one of those tornado warning lights that went on. Go ahead. I'm sorry now. Let me get back on track here. All right, let me start all over again on this. Keep in mind that Elvis was a minor at that time, and when he signed the contract with us for Sun Records, he had to have, or I insisted on, his mother and father understanding exactly what we were going to attempt to do with Elvis. And then when it came time to sell his contract, we went over this with them out of total fairness. And especially, I wanted Elvis to know that this was not a thing that his future, we didn't believe in it, and even though RCA was going to buy it, there was something in his mind that I feel that he felt that maybe if I leave home, so to speak, being the type person that he was, I might fall flat on my face even with the RCA records. But that didn't happen, of course, and we all know the history now. In regard to the other artists, they were proud for him because I think they felt maybe that gave them a little more room to get looked at a little sooner. It's kind of like a farm club with a baseball team, you know, and this sort of thing. They loved him very much. We had well, I don't like this necessarily, but we had to, because of the necessity of being so small, we had such a close, intimate relation in our record company, and I think that was one of the potential successes or the potential for success that we did have, because at that time we were all struggling to make it. That included me, believe me, because after we got out of that studio, it was up to me, a selling committee and sales force of one, in effect, to try to prove to the people. And each artist knew that I was doing my best, and I don't think there was any jealousy at all about Elvis leaving, and I don't think there was really any reaction of saying, man, I'm really glad that he's gone. I think they realized that I did need the money. Possibly that would inure, because I still was showing great interest in these artists, my remaining artists, and the artists that would come later on. And so I think it was a feeling that hopefully more and better things for Elvis, and hopefully more and greater things for them with Sun.
Okay, now I just want to ask a little kind of before we get back to Elvis, but personally, I have to tell you right now that the first record I ever bought when I was 6 years old was Great Balls of Fire by Jerry Lee.
You got to be kidding.
I swear to God, if I had the original pressing today, I would send it to you for you to sign.
Oh, my God. That I might tell you this, too. Do you know that was one of the most difficult records I ever cut? If you analyze that thing, I want to tell you, Otis Blackwell, I mean, he sent a demo record down here that was so good, I said, how in the world, Elvis, can we top this demo that old Otis sent down here, you know? Well, that's super great. I really appreciate that, Stephen.
But the questions I had to do with the Dollar Quartet session. Now, obviously, there were a lot of legal bullshit involved here. And Carl trying to sue to keep ownership and all this stuff. But I just want to talk with you about just strictly from a musical level, okay?
All right.
Do you want to talk about that?
We can touch on it. Sure, we'd be glad to touch on it. The $1 Million Quartet session was just what most people, I think, probably have read about or heard about. we were recording, I was recording Carl Perkins, and just so happened, this was way after, keep in mind that Elvis had gone to RCA. And that afternoon, Jerry Lee Lewis was in the studio. And wouldn't you know that Johnny Cash dropped in, and actually Johnny was the last one to get there, and Elvis dropped in, and then here comes Johnny Cash. So it was just a kind of a get-together. We took a little time out from Carl's session, Perkins' session, and just had fun. And I told Jack Clement, who was one of my engineers, well, the engineer outside of me at that time, I said, turn on the tape and let's get this for posterity. Had no, we didn't try to play the microphones or anything. It was just a good time get-together because Elvis was glad to see all of these people because they were all doing not too bad by that time either. You know, Jerry Lee at that time, though, was just beginning to get moving, you know? Yeah, that's right. This was before, though, a whole lot of shaking, you know? But the one thing that I hate about that, there are today missing tapes that were running back there in the control room, nobody trying to record. We didn't want it that way. It was just the posterity of it, of the get-together, of the people there that we had something to do with, and they just by chance and by accident happened to meet there together. And but there is a bootleg version of part of that tape out, and I would not have taken any amount of money. Now, believe it, I may have sold Elvis Presley's contract for $35,000, but this is something that, and I do not know till this day what happened to the rest of the so-called $1 Million Quartet sessions. But anyway, it was something that I would give anything in the world to have in my library, and it would not be for sale. And the only way that it would have ever been for sale is just for the many fans of all of these people, the Cashes, the Lewises, the Perkins, and Elvis. You know, it would have been for them, and it would have been a special edition thing, and not special edition to make $1 jillion, but just something that their fans could have bought based on the fact that their favorite singer or their favorite artist was in it. But it's really a sad point in my life that I don't have all of the tapes that was done on that. And it's also very sad that the bootleg session got out, and we tried to stop it, and it was very unsuccessful. It started overseas. Okay.
Now, after Elvis went to RCA, did you and he or Parker well, did you and he and Parker have a continuing relationship, either on a friendship, as friends or as recording producer and recording artist?
Well, I was always a friend, of course, to Tom Parker. I mean, he and I fussed a hell of a lot, but it was in jest. I was as hard-headed as Parker. But even till this day, there's a hell of a lot of things that Parker did with Presley that I would not have done, and I'm sure that he could say the same thing about me had I continued to hold on to Presley, because it's always easy to second guess. So far as Elvis is concerned, and Parker and I did not stay in close contact, but believe me, there was no animosity or anything between Tom Parker and me, because ultimately he did what I requested, or at least he saw that it was done, and so I had no complaints at all with my relationship with Tom Parker, except in the beginning, as I said, when I heard that the rumors were being spread, and I felt he was suspect, and I'm not sure till this day that he wasn't. But Tom would understand, and I hope he hears this. Elvis, we had a continuing connection. It wasn't. Believe me, I was very busy. I was as busy in my way as Elvis Presley because I had more than one artist. And we had from Maine to California, and we were setting up good distribution around the world through second and third parties, you know. So my hands were full, but Elvis Presley would come by frequently. And not only would he come by the studio, but he loved to drop in at my home when he thought I was there, the few nights I would be there before midnight, and knock on the door, ring the doorbell, and come in and bring his entourage. And we'd play skill pool and pinball machine and play records and talk and have fun. He also would come to the studio in the main, and when he would, he'd always want to go into my office, leave his entourage out in the lobby, and just he and I sit down and talk. I think it was some kind of a ventilation for Elvis, because at times it's easy, of course, we all know this, I think even people listening that's never been in the business, but you can see that this is a rather demanding business. I don't care who is doing it, and especially if you're very successful, I'm not sure that it's not twice as demanding. So we would talk about everything from the business to the Bible to our raising to our values, and really not talk about anything that's serious, but we kept up that close feel. At that time, I thought of Elvis more as a son. Later on, his age began to catch up with me, so I think it was kind of a father-son relationship. But those were good conversations that I enjoyed plumb on up until Elvis died, and I miss him now.
Now, of course, you knew him before and after he left the Army. In listening to a lot of the interviews that we have with Elvis, before he went into the Army, he sounded like, very humble and really kind of insecure and timid, like you said before. And after in the interviews that I've heard after he came out of the Army, he sounded a lot more sure of himself. He sounded like in fact, he said he'd been reading a lot. He sounded more articulate, and he had less of a twang in his voice. Now, do you take those observations of mine? Is there any, is there anything to that?
I dispute the twang. I was so glad that he held on to his natural pronunciation and enunciation and diction. Oh, I'm certain that probably those things improved because of the fact, let's face it, he was getting a little older, okay? And let's face it also that the sophistication of music, quote unquote, and I don't like that because I really just think music is what you have to say, and if somebody wants to hear it, then as far as I'm concerned, you have got a masterpiece. So I think that Elvis certainly was more confident, living, in the Army as long as he did, and thinking about what had happened and what could happen, hopefully, when he got back from the service. It was just, in my opinion, pure and simply growing up.
Now, I know that the next couple of questions might be a little difficult, but they are important to the story. When was the last time you saw Elvis alive?
Let me see. The last time I saw Elvis, it was quite a while. Let me tell you this. This is a very intimate thing. I'm ashamed of this. I knew Elvis was having some problems. To what extent, I really didn't know. I knew of his deep-seated emotions from the many years that I had known him. I knew of his strength inside, and yet these things apparently were taking place. For some reason, life became apparently a montage of uncertain color to him. Well, I'm talking mainly about just the emotional makeup of this young man, the pressures that had been on him for so long, him not having really anybody truly to turn to that he felt that he could talk on a one-on-one basis as frequently as he needed to. I felt that this was coming on, and it was in my mind, believe me. I don't guess a week passed, and certainly 2 or 3 weeks did not pass, when I knew Elvis was in town, that I didn't call Elvis up and say, "Hey, man, I'm gonna take my spite out on you and come over and eat some of your chow," you know? And this sort of thing, as so many times he had been to my house and loved Becky, my wife's breakfast in the morning, 5 or 6 o'clock, eggs, man, a lot of toast and butter. And but I don't remember exactly. It was approximately 2 years before he died. He had come by the studio, and it was one of the times when he had lost a lot of weight and looked pretty darn good, you know. But Elvis had from the beginning, he had this water problem way before he had his difficulty with medication. Because Elvis never did drink and this sort of thing, but he had a problem with weight, of accumulation of fluids, and he could go up and he could come down just as fast, and this was even when he was a young man in his 20s. But he looked real good, but it was in my mind, and I was getting the feel that Elvis wasn't doing as well. Now it was more of a feel than I was hearing that much directly, because believe it or not, I was awfully busy, but I should have gone, and I don't want to make this answer too long, but it is a very, to me, it is a very personal question because of my feeling for Elvis Presley then as now. And that I did not see Elvis more, because I honestly believe this. I'm certainly not a psychologist or a psychiatrist, but I am, if you don't make me too damn mad, I am a good friend. And there's one thing that I think Elvis Presley thought about Sam Phillips, if nothing else, that I didn't shoot him any BS or anybody else. Now, we could have a difference of opinion, as I've had with many people, but this is the thing, and he knew that I was very confident in what I believed and what I thought and what I did. And Elvis liked to be around a person like that. So it was approximately 2 years, and then the next time I saw him, of course, was at Graceland in the casket. Well, I was an undertaker when I was going to high school, and I saw many families torn up by death. Death, I guess, is still something that many of us find very difficult to deal with. I think we all know it's inevitable, but I did have the opportunity to see death at first hand many, many times as an undertaker, an embalmer, and working around funeral homes and hospitals. Back then, you picked up people at the hospitals and this sort of thing that were alive, took them from home to the hospitals and this sort of thing. But when Elvis died, and believe you me, this was a thing that it wasn't, to me, the fact that he had just left my conscience for a moment, because he hadn't left the conscience of anybody for a moment, even though physically he was dead. But there was an unexplainable void of disbelief that Elvis Presley, and I don't want it to sound like because he was the great king of rock and roll, because I've seen a few artists and worked with them and this sort of thing, But there was always that something within me that was much closer than a business associate or an artist, and not necessarily that I was that partial to Elvis, but it was just something about Elvis that I loved, and I loved dearly. And I truly felt that he felt the same way about me, and I can say that I have not had, even with my attitude about death and the hereafter, I can truly say that I cannot remember when that I have had a blacker day.
Okay, we're rolling.
I tell you what we'll do. Let's start from the top because, and then if you find anything in that, but we'll put on here. You might put on here. Response to number 2 to Elvis's death. You might want to pick this one. I don't know. You rolling, Emery?
Yeah.
No, okay. When I heard of Elvis's death, I can say, as I think everyone, needless to say, really, that we were shocked to disbelief. But I had worked at a funeral home for a number of years when I was in high school trying to make a living and go to school too. And I had been subjected to people at times like this. So I felt like I could deal with it, except that, I stood in my conscience and said, can this really be true? And I hope that the people will understand here the reason that I think that no one in the world could have felt closer to Elvis and could have been in any way more affected than the way I was affected, no matter how much they love him, and I know there are jillions that do. The evidence has been there for so many years. But this was, without a doubt, the blackest day of my life. But let me tell you this. Knowing that Elvis Presley had meant so much to so many people, knowing the things that we had overcome together, knowing the things that he overcame years later, knowing the highs and lows in his life, and knowing also that his fans stayed with him like they did, I think there was some real strength and a bond there that made us all say to ourselves, this guy is not God, but he is a good friend. First of all. Secondly, he is a good man. Thirdly, he is a person that has contributed an awful lot to not only just the music world, but in my opinion, to the common language, which is music all over the world. And for that, I think we all had to find solace in the fact that Elvis might be dead physically, but Elvis lives on now, and I think forevermore.
Okay, we're down to the last couple of questions. Is there anything that you, in retrospect, might have done a little differently than the way it happened?
Well, I think a person can go back over their lives, no matter how nearly perfect it may be, or no matter what success or failures that have come along the pike for us, and say there are a few things. But basically, what I had in mind to begin with did come to fruition for me, and that was to give black people and to give underprivileged, quote-unquote, white Southerners, and from any other place in the country. But there was so much talent that I grew up with and knew about in the South. I don't think there is really basically anything that I would have changed that would have any basic effect on what I did. I know that I sold Elvis, and I've been asked many, many times, did I regret it? I certainly did not. It worked out great for me. It worked out great for Elvis. I know that there was just many times that I felt maybe I could have milked out a few more dollars out of a record by uh, prostituting a record or trying to put out too much stuff on different artists, but these are key things to me. I did not want to overload the market with people, new artists especially, because they're like a baby. They had to be brought along slowly. Not just the artists themselves, but the public to begin, if I could get them played and get them played long enough, I knew the public would decide either that they are what they want or they're not what they want. Because I have always had a deep faith in the general public. I don't know that I'd have made a good politician, but I do have good faith. The only thing that I had to worry about in the main after I cut the records was that we did get exposure, and the ones that I missed on that I just thought that I shouldn't miss on, I never looked back because the ones that I got the plays on, if they didn't come through, that's fine. If they did come through, then the public decided, and that's the way I've always felt about the public. I've been in this business not for my own personal aggrandizement, not to get rich, but to satisfy, I guess, a yearning to be some kind, some form of a little missionary of some sort. Because I've always had, I think, somewhat of an evangelical style. I've always believed in my God. I've always believed in nature. I'm not necessarily a quote-unquote good person, but I believe in so many fundamentals. And this business has been so good to me. The few mistakes that I made in the business, I don't know right now if I had it to do over again, and even knowing what I know now, that I could have done it any better.
Well, let me amen to that, Sam.
Thank you.
Just from me personally. Okay, now the last question, your last general question, then I want to get some comments from you about the RCA, the new RCA campaign of releases.
No, they have been in contact with Sally on this, but I'm not that familiar with it. Believe me, Stephen, I have to stay pretty busy for an old man to make a living.
There you go.
Really.
All right, then let me ask you, because there are some, well, let me ask this one last question, and we'll get to the next.
Okay.
What do you think from this standpoint, from the standpoint of, Elvis's, what would have been Elvis's 50th birthday? What's the biggest misunderstanding that people have about Elvis as a person? The way he was as a person.
It's an odd thing about Elvis Presley, and here again, I don't want to be too redundant about this, but Elvis, believe it or not, did not want to be. Sure, he loved the accolades, as we all do, and anybody says they don't, I'm just scared maybe that they're trying to hibernate and don't know it. But I think that the misconceptions that the people had grew very few and far between later on, because as Elvis used his influence, and as hopefully you'll believe this, Sun Records also, that we crossed a lot of barriers in music. We amalgamated music. We just didn't want the segregation in music, because to me music is music is music if it says something. And I think that the misconceptions that might still be out there with the general public, now I'm not talking about artists or even his contemporaries or anything, which I honestly, truly believe he was as well liked as anybody by his contemporaries and even the artists that have come later. But probably the biggest misconception of Elvis is that he was not what he purported to be because all of the bad publicity that came. And I'm talking about, this is a very minute bunch of people. And you know, as I know, and the people that are listening know, that a lot of damn trash came out on this man, and a lot of things that came out that was true. But you have to look back beyond what was the reason for this. You have to look at this person and realize that he is mortal. And I think in the final analysis, and with all that has been said bad about him, I think that people in the main, young and old, have looked at him because he was so well liked by the masses of people. And I don't only mean just white people, but I'm talking about blacks and Hispanics. Elvis Presley stood in so many ways because he wasn't afraid to try different things in music. He always looked like, hey, I'm believable. He always had that little sass about him, but he would come around to that dang smile that would break you down. So I think that people saw so much in Elvis Presley that they wanted to really idolize. And after it became fashionable, man, to do a little boogie, you know, the older folks and this sort of thing that used to fight him, I think that there just wasn't too many people around, except maybe some of the dyed-in-the-wool people that thought, well, if you're not listening to Shostakovich, you're not listening to music. But I just don't see an awful lot on the surface of the people, and believe me, Elvis has been dead long enough for me to hear as many stories as anybody else. I think that there is probably not too much illusion other than what I have stated that is around about Elvis Presley.
Okay. Well, Sam, that about winds it up for me. Is there anything you want to add?
No, I think that covers it, Stephen. Stephen, I hope it's satisfactory to you and everything.
Well, I'll tell you, Sam, if it sounds as good on second listening as it did going through it, it's a killer.
Well, I appreciate that. I really do, Steve. Well, I was very much impressed with the general line of questioning when Sally showed me the notes on them and everything, although I didn't get much time today because of the things that I told you in the beginning. But it's something that I think we've gotten down to some down under things that are more than the everyday questions that you hear on so many interviews.
Well, I appreciate that. I really appreciate you spending the time to do that, and not just giving us the stock answers that
Well, Sally also told me and that Westwood One was some kind of an outfit. I think one of my stations had done a couple of simulcasts or something with you people, and y'all were awfully good to work with. So that was a help because I tell you, I get so many calls on these interviews and everything. You know, I just am reticent to do a lot of them, but I do think this, and I think they're. I think a radio thing is real good on this, you know. I think it's probably, in many instances, there's been a lot of TV stuff and this sort of thing, but I think this radio thing, it has a fascination for me. I hope you will send me a copy of the whole program.
most definitely.
Will you do that, Stephen? And I tell Peter hello for me, will you?
Peter,
Townsend.
certainly will.
Will you do that?
Have you met him before?
No, but I just know of him, and I know of his reputation, and he's a killer.
Why don't you give him a little message, put it right onto the tape, and I'll send it over with Karen.
Well, is the tape still rolling?
Sam, is the tape still rolling? Yeah.
Well, Peter, I tell you, I've enjoyed this interview with Stephen very, very much, and one of the days I would really like to meet you. I know of your reputation, but I won't tell any women about it. But anyway, if you're in Memphis or Stephen is in Memphis, we would like to have you visit with us and sit down and chat, and it's a privilege to put my little input into this program, and I'm sure it'll come out great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Let me let you talk to Sally just a minute, and she'll tell you. Did you tell him
I've
about?
already-
You got it.
I'm
Okay.
taking it to
Did you?
tonight, and I got the
okay.
address and everything.
Well, that's fine, Stephen. It's a pleasure, and I'm looking forward to hearing the program. Is this done simultaneous with all the stations, or is it one of those where they can run it at their discretion?
Well, we're putting it up on the satellite on Saturday, November 17th.
Right.
So that's the air date that's the premiere air date
I see.
of the program.
Right.
And I'm pretty sure we're going to be pressing it up on disc
Uh-huh.
for those stations who don't have dishes.
Right. Right.
But again, those won't be available to the stations from the air date.
Right. Right.
One of them disc is copies of the program.
Well, I appreciate that, and you let us hear from you if we can help any further on it. Well, thank you so much, Stephen. It's good to talk to you. Thank you, sir. Okay, thank you. He's not